Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Welcome to Mary vs. the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And Dennis Ling.
And today we are watching the 1985 film Pee-wee's Big Adventure, directed by
Tim Burton.
I can't believe that I blanked on that. And starring Pee-wee Herman, which is, of course, the alter ego of the comedian Paul Reubens. Is this Tim Burton's first film?
I think he did Frankenweenie, and that was like a known thing, but
Right, that was a
I
short
think it's
film.
for live action and
Full length.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the original Frankenweenie, I think that's like half an hour.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is Tim Burton's first big film, and I've never seen it.
Now, you grew up watching the show.
Yes.
Now, I never saw the show, so I've only seen the movie. I didn't. There's a sequel, right?
There is a sequel.
Yeah.
That's I was filmed, in 88, I think. It was later.
Yeah, I didn't see the sequel, but I saw the first one, and I liked it. But
Okay, so I've never seen this. I did, but yes, I grew up watching the TV show on CBS.
now, is the show always inside? Is it always in the playhouse, or?
You're trying to get me to remember something from 1986, 87.
Yeah.
You know what's sad? I don't remember it anywhere near as well as I remember episodes of the Thundercats, and that's unfortunate because I know that Pee-wee's Playhouse was a way better show. So yeah, I've never seen this. I did grow up watching the TV show on Saturday mornings because I was like the right age for that.
And the TV show came after the movie. The
Yes.
movie was a hit, so they made a TV show.
Right.
Sounds like.
And the TV show, from what I gathered, is sort of a toned down version of the stage show. Because the character Pee-wee Herman started out, he was created by Paul Reubens and Phil Hartman, which I didn't realize until today, that Phil Hartman was actually a co-creator. I mean, I remembered that he was on the show, but I did not know that he was involved in creating the character.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's in the movie. I don't know either. I don't know anything. But so anyway, yeah, I do remember the TV show, and Cherry and the Magic Screen, and and the TV show had a crazy cast. I mean, it had Phil Hartman and Lawrence Fishburne and Esapatha Murkison, and there were a lot of people on that show that you later went on to see in lots of different things.
I think I saw Cyndi Lauper sang the theme song.
That wouldn't surprise me because I know that some of the music from the TV show was Mark Mothersbaugh, of course, but also the residents of all people. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like,
That's
of course,
fun.
I didn't know that as a kid. And I definitely feel like the aesthetic of the show kind of informed what I like because he's riffing off of that kind of mid-century look.
Now, I wonder if... I don't know the history at all, but I wonder if this show was like Mothersbaugh's intro to Hollywood film music.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if he had done any Hollywood work yet.
Because we know him as the Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
Guy
But I mean, before that, he was doing Rugrats,
Mm-hmm.
and it got Emmys, and I mean, it was a really highly regarded TV show. But I never saw the film, and I don't know if that was just that my mom just. I would have been 6 when it came out, and she had no idea what it was, so why take your kid to it? And I just never caught it on cable. I never saw it, which is weird because I loved the TV show.
It was definitely on cable. That's where I saw it.
See, so why? How did I miss it? I don't know. I just never saw it. And the thing is, I loved Tim Burton at the time too. I grew up. I saw Edward Scissorhands, and I saw Beetlejuice and Batman Returns. And, in fact, I just rewatched Batman Returns back around Christmas time, and my God, what an amazing movie.
Yeah.
One of the best superhero films ever made? Or comic book films ever made? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it Tim Burton's best film? Maybe. I mean, it's amazing.
Now, you haven't seen the Snyder Cut, so hold your judgment. So anyway, what do you think Pee-wee's Big Adventure is about?
Well, the only thing I know is that he has his bicycle stolen from him and he's got to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's the plot. And I think that's all I know because my brain keeps saying, and then he goes to the circus, and I'm like, I think that's the sequel, because which I've also never seen.
Right.
So does he go to the circus in this? I don't know. I don't know what happens to him. He has a bike stolen from him.
So any lines do you remember? Like,
no, I don't know.
Nothing.
I don't know anything. I have no idea what happens in this. Again, it's a Tim Burton film, so I assume that it has a sort of unreal quality. I mean, it's Pee Wee Herman. It's already an unreal quality. You know, it's this persona, this character who is this childlike adult.
We've seen Ed Wood. We've seen Big Fish.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see Big Eyes.
No, I wanted to see Big Eyes.
Yeah, we should still see that. But we liked Big Fish a lot.
Yeah,
so.
I actually really like Big Fish. I think it's a decent movie.
Like I feel like the less tricks he has, like the less he gets into like CGI now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the better he is.
I won't watch those Alice in Wonderland movies.
Yeah.
I've seen The Planet of the Apes, and man, that was bad.
Once is enough.
I'm so mad about it. I'm still angry about that movie. I haven't seen Dumbo, but I'll admit I'm curious. I mean, I wouldn't go into it expecting a good movie, but I am curious about it.
Right.
But yeah, so Tim Burton's had a really uneven career. Like, his early films are amazing, and then I mean, where do you think that's? I mean, everything after Ed Wood is downhill, except maybe for Big Fish. Although I hear Big Eyes is good. I mean, you know, I guess if it has the word big in it, it's a decent movie. So I'm expecting Pee-wee's Big Adventure to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we go watch it?
He goes big.
Should we go watch it?
Yep.
All right.
So I have one question. Does this man have a rotting plate of breakfast every day? Sitting there? He eats, what, like 3 bits of cereal and leaves because he's 98 pounds.
Yes.
And
97, I believe.
Yeah. Maybe the dog just eats the rest of it. 'Cause he's got bacon and waffles and all that Mr. T cereal. Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't even know how to. Where do you begin with this movie? And I mean that in a good way. I mean, obviously, I was completely delighted by it.
Yeah.
It's a cartoon, insofar as in its sensibility.
Right.
There's something about Pee-wee that he has something of a very kind of Looney Tunes about him.
Well, for one thing, like I mentioned Rushmore at the very beginning because he has this fantasy about
Yes, when we
Tour
were
de France.
Yes.
And the beginning of Rushmore starts with like the lead character solves the hardest problem in the world. It's this high school fantasy thing. But there just seems to be a lot of parallels there. It seems a lot of like...
It's funny you say that because I do think that there is something to seeing a similarity in the aesthetics of Pee Wee Herman and Tim Burton, really, as well. And Wes Anderson, who is a bit more serious.
He's serious, but there is kind of a... I don't know, kind of playfulness, kind of like... kitschiness.
Yeah.
Definitely like a lack of reality. Like they both love artifice kind of thing. Like they don't care if anything is too real or they don't care about that at all. But
Yeah, they're not going for realism. Is definitely right. It is definitely more about aesthetics.
Yeah.
And the aesthetics in question here is a candy-colored mid-20th century United States of sort of streamline design and 50s 60s kitsch.
So would you say the plot is important to this movie? what there is of it?
The plot is very simple. His bike is stolen by his town rival Francis.
Yeah.
Who is a rich boy who feels entitled to whatever he wants, and he wants Pee-wee's amazing bike. And it is an amazing bike. It's a Schwinn, I guess?
Yeah, I think.
And, well, I'm only guessing it's a Schwinn because it looks a lot like my stepdad's old bike that is up in the barn. Francis has his bike stolen from him while he's out shopping one day. And the rest of the movie is him trying to get his bike back.
We learn early on that it was stolen by the rival.
The rival.
But then that kind of goes away.
Well, that becomes not. It's not really important.
Yeah.
I mean, it is important because Pee-wee's entire motivation is to get the bike back because it's his favorite thing in the world. Then it becomes a road trip story where he is crossing the American Southwest from, Southern California to Texas because he's been told by a psychic that the bike is in the basement of the Alamo, and of course there is no basement in the Alamo.
Yeah.
It's funny when she says it's in the Alamo, it's in its basement, and I remember as we're sitting here watching the movie, I'm like, well, but the Alamo doesn't have a basement, and I thought, why do I know that? And the only reason I can say that I know it is because I'm sure somebody mentioned it in connection to this movie.
Yeah.
Because I've never been to the Alamo. I have no reason to know anything about the Alamo. In terms of does it have a basement. So there are things about this movie that definitely filtered down to me, even though I've never seen it.
Had you heard Tell Marge sent you?
I've heard that.
Yeah.
And I've even seen, I guess in GIF form, when her face distorts.
Right.
So I'm sure I've seen that used as a GIF somewhere on like Twitter or whatever.
Had you seen the dance on the...
I've seen the dance before. I've seen that before. I don't know where. I've never... But... So those are the sorts of things that have found their way somehow to me without having ever actually watched the movie. There's a lot about the movie that never found its way to me, like that I had no idea. Like going back to the beginning of the film. So the film opens and we're introduced to Pee-wee's life, where he lives in a very kooky sort of bungalow that's decked out in, again, like that mid-20th century look of, think of like a 50s diner. His kitchen table is a booth, a corner booth.
It's a fish tank window.
Yes. Yeah, everything has that kind of look to it. His way of getting up in the morning is an entire Rube Goldberg contraption so that he has breakfast waiting for him when he gets downstairs. It has as we were watching, we went, oh, that looks, that reminds you of Wallace and Gromit. And I don't know if Aardman actually did any of the stop motion in the movie, but I know they worked on the TV show. He does his shopping for the day and comes back to get his bike after he's, chained it up. The bike has been stolen, and of course, it's weird. There's not a lot to exactly describe because it's all about the acting, the visual experience of it, the music cues, the lighting.
Like there's this funny bit where he's like he's trying to retrace his steps and find the bike, and everyone is riding a bike suddenly.
Yes. That's the thing. There are so many wonderful little visual things going on. First one person ride by, and then another person, and then like all of a sudden, like a guy's on a unicycle. There's a guy on a penny farthing. There's like 5 people on like a 5-person tandem bike. It's like that kind of building of like visual things. He looks into a store window. He thinks he sees his bike, and of course he turns around. It's like a regular bike. It's that kind of gags going on through the film. It's really hard to describe that on a show like this because it's like you just want to like sit a person down and make them watch the movie, Right. So anyway, he basically tortures his neighbors. Not tortures them, but he makes them all go to a town meeting in his basement so that they can hunt for the bike, and everybody just gets exasperated with because he spends hours grilling them over what to do and all of his pieces of evidence, and it ends up with him seeking out a psychic, and she's the one who tells him that it's in Texas at the Alamo in its basement, and she of course is just like looking at things around the room to say, and it just comes up with nonsense. The film transitions into a road trip movie with him hitchhiking his way across the country to find his bike, and he gets into adventures with hobos and convicts on the run and a diner waitress with an angry boyfriend at a truck stop where there's like these awesome dinosaurs, like basically like fiberglass dinosaurs that light up at night. It looks really cool, actually. Yeah. And I hope those still exist somewhere. And I would love to spend a night watching the sunrise from inside of a T-Rex's head.
Something tells me that you can't do that part of it. But,
oh.
But it was very cool just it being inside. They're sitting on the tongue and you see the teeth.
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
There's even an animated sequence.
There is.
Just his eyes are animated where he's
like lost in the desert at night.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's all sorts of just wonderful little visual gags, and again, it is very much like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, even like even in a Bugs Bunny style where he's with Mikey or Mickey,
the convict, and
they're about to get caught by the police, and no time passes at all, but suddenly he's dressed as a woman.
Yes.
and the cop just wants to see how he's dressed.
Yeah, it's very much one of those sorts of gags where all of a sudden Pee-wee is in drag and pretending to be Mickey's like wife or whatever.
But very Bugs Bunny.
But it is very Bugs Bunny. It's great. Eventually, he does make it to Texas, and of course, there's no basement at the Alamo. Jan Hooks as a tour guide, and him getting more and more exasperated with her. He ends up at a rodeo because he's
chased by Brutus.
Bluto or Brutus,
Yeah.
the boyfriend of the waitress has been hunting him on the road this whole time. I remember
he ends up in a bullfight.
Yes, he ends up in a bullfight, and then he ends up at a biker bar. This is the scene where he impresses them with his dancing on the bar to tequila.
Yep. And
they make him one of the gang, and then he goes to ride off and, of course, wrecks the bike that he is given, the motorcycle. At which point he ends up in the hospital, and because he's in the hospital, then he sees his bike on television. That, if I remember correctly, so he sees his bike on television, and he sees that the bike is being used in a film back in Hollywood. So he is on the road again and makes his way to the Warner Brothers lot.
Yeah, and then we have basically a Blazing Saddles ending.
A little bit, yeah. It is very much. But even Blazing Saddles again is harkening back to like old cartoons and whatnot. In that you're kind of breaking it. It's not exactly breaking the fourth wall in this case, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
So that he ends up on the Warner Brothers lot. And of course, this is a Warner Brothers film. And it's again sort of evoking the way that a studio might have looked back in the golden age of Hollywood with a whole bunch of different sound stages and people in costumes milling about. And, it kind of reminds me of in Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
When they're going through the different like sound stages. As he's hunting for his bike, he finds the film that is being made with his bike, and it's a pastiche of a film about an orphan living with nuns who's being adopted, and he wants to give his bike back to the orphanage, or it's like an intentionally like terrible soppy sort of that type of film that would have been made at like back in the 40s or something. And he is dressed as a nun, as an extra, and as they're doing the scene, of course, he runs off with his own bike, and then you have a chase through the Warner Brothers lot, and we end up running through a bunch of, again, films, the type of films that nobody was making in the 80s.
There's like a beach blanket
There
film.
is a beach blanket film. There is a Godzilla movie. There is some sort of like Christmas movie being made with like Santa Claus and dancing gingerbread men. And as he's running through the different lots, different like parts of those sets are like being like accidentally picked up by the studio cops who are chasing him, so that eventually there's like this long train of set pieces that are like following him through the studio until he is able to escape from the lot, only to find himself at a pet store. It's very much a cartoon where he sees this pet store on fire, and so he has to stop and leave his bike because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it does sort of establish that like Pee-wee he does have a morality,
Right.
So he stops and he starts helping all of the poor little animals escape from this pet store that's on fire. And it's a funny sequence, of course, where he is first laying free all the dogs, and he lets a chimp out, and then the chimp is helping him move all the animals. And each time he like moves more animals out, he passes by a tank of snakes, and he's just like, "No, I'm not helping the snakes." and each time like more animals are being let out, he's letting rats out, he's picking up fish, everything, and then finally at the end, he's just like, okay, I guess I gotta get the snakes. And so the next thing you see is him like running out of the store screaming, holding snakes in his hands, and then he faints. And it's very funny. Yeah. But because he faints, the studio cops can catch up with him, and of course this is where he gets his Hollywood ending, because they decide that not only is he a hero for saving the animals, his story is so incredible that they want to make a film of it. And so they do. And the film is starring James Brolin
and Morgan Fairchild.
So James Brolin is playing
as PW
as Pee-wee Herman. And of course Brolin has like, just an amazing beard, and but he's wearing the gray suit, and Morgan Fairchild is, all to the. Oh, I forgot one of the things that they run through is a Twisted Sister video.
Oh yeah,
which is so weird. Like of all the things I wasn't expecting to see, the end of the film is that he gets a movie made of his amazing journey to get his bike back, and
everyone he met is there.
Everyone he met on
except for Large Marge, of course.
Except for Large Marge, who was a ghost the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, describing the plot does not convey what the film is like, though.
It borrows from a lot of genres. In the magic store sequence, it's kind of like a James Bond meets Q. And here's like the gadgets that you'll be using in the film.
Because he does end up using things like the trick gum and.
So I was going to mention, apparently this movie is taught in film school. So Paul Rubens, Phil Hartman, and Michael Varhol wrote it, but they had never written a screenplay before, so they just picked up a Sid Field book. Sid Field wrote the book on how to write screenplays, and apparently it just follows the book. The film is 90 minutes long, the script is 90 pages long, and the first act ends on page 30, second act ends on page 60.
Huh.
So everything is just regimented and stuff.
That's interesting, huh? I did not know that.
So it's almost like they just did Mad Libs and just fill everything in.
Yeah. What do you think about it as a Tim Burton movie?
As a Tim Burton movie, it's so he was like, he just made short films at the time, and he was known for Frankenweenie at the time, and I guess they saw it, so they grabbed him like, oh, he's a fellow weirdo. So
well, yeah.
And it's interesting because it feels like mostly he's just making a movie, like he's just doing what they wrote or something, but then during the dream sequences he's like, okay, I get to be Tim Burton.
So I kind of don't agree with you that he doesn't have input though on the rest of the film in terms of the way it looks.
I just mean like when it's a dream sequence, it's like it's full on, Beetlejuice Tim Burton.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree with you.
Suddenly like there he is, fully formed.
Yeah, there is like a nightmare that Pee-wee has where clown doctors are operating on his bike and destroying it. It is very Tim Burton. It's strange angles, and the architecture all shifts in a way that, yeah, you can.
I mean, there's Tim Burton stuff all through, like
yes.
like when he turns on the sprinklers and you see like the hoses with the different colors.
Yeah.
Like that looks very Tim Burton-y, and of course the house and all. But it still feels like a collaboration in a way that I feel like Tim Burton didn't do after that.
I think that's probably true. Yeah, this does feel more. Yeah, I think you're right that it's more collaborative.
So going into this film, I wanted to contrast it with who's Jeannot, I guess is the guy who did Amelie and Delicatessen and City of Lost Children.
Okay.
That because he was another animator who went on to become a film director.
Right. Okay.
And Tim Burton was an animator. He went on, and so I was thinking, well, maybe there's some kind of parallel between the two. But after seeing this, it just so reminds me of Wes Anderson. I can't stop thinking of Wes Anderson. like Pee Wee Herman so reminds me of Max Fisher from Rushmore.
Oh, I can see that. You know,
Like-
what's interesting to me is the difference, because I do think you're onto something there, in that they both kind of live these fantasies. The aesthetics are kind of similar, except that with Pee Wee Herman, it's like, you know, ramped up to, you know, cartoonish levels.
Pee Wee never is. Like, the point of the movie is not for Pee Wee to grow up.
Well, yeah, no. But that's where I was going with
Yeah.
it. Is that what's interesting? You know, Anderson, it's all about indulging in that, and then learning that you have to put it away.
Right.
And with Pee Wee Herman and this movie, you never have to put it away. You never actually. He gets to stay a man-child,
Right.
and for this, it works. I mean, I would never want to see a sad grown-up Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, yeah,
That's a
no.
horrifying idea.
So wait, who did Being There, the director?
Hal Ashby.
Right. So I feel like Hal Ashby is like a link for the two of them.
Oh yeah, no, I think. Well, I mean, Wes Anderson is basically, yeah, it's like Hal Ashby, but with like, I guess, early Tim Burton mixed in. It's weird.
But it wouldn't surprise me if Tim Burton and the writers were influenced by Hal Ashby somehow, like maybe like Harold and Maude or something.
If you want to talk about who influenced Tim Burton, I'm like, Murnau.
Yeah.
I mean, Fritz Lang. I don't know.
Oh yeah, sure.
You know, going off on a different track. Man, I miss Phil Hartman.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
And of course he's a reporter.
Yeah, it's
a
great.
perfect reporter.
He shows up. He shows up at the end. I think he is at one point a voice on the television.
Yeah.
But he shows up at the very end as a reporter interviewing our villain Francis.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to just see him, even for like the 30 seconds he's on screen. You know. Oh, you know the other thing, watching this, where I was really heavily reminded, and not just because of the Danny Elfman score, but I'm like, yeah, this reminds me a lot of The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, The Simpsons are a cartoon, but they're also working in. I'm kind of circling around a thing that I can't quite put a name to yet. Do you?
Like, is it kitschy or is it like 50s
Well,
Americana or?
They're all. This is all boomers grappling with their childhood in different ways, and yet they're all in love with the aesthetics from their childhood. And when I say the aesthetics, I mean both the actual like design, the way things look. You think diners and cars and Formica tables and
With boomerangs.
with
on them.
boomerangs on them. Yes,
And boomerangs are mentioned.
yeah, and shiny red and chrome and things like that.
And also dinosaurs.
And dinosaurs were a big
Yeah.
yes.
There's a lot of dinosaurs.
There's a lot of that. Like the films and cartoons of that time period. So there's a certain of grappling with all of that because human beings are tinged with nostalgia. I mean, the first time we run into this whole thing that I'm trying to, grapple with, I guess, is American Graffiti. Or, I guess you could go all the way back to Sha Na Na as sort of the first iteration of it when it hadn't even really died yet. Wes Anderson's like a slightly different case because he's Gen X, I think. Honestly, older Gen X are we're still living. They were, and when I say they, I mean you. We're still living in like the aftershocks of those looks and like those films and cartoons being around.
Are you saying this because I just turned 50?
I am. Like I said, I'm circling around to a thing that I don't have a name for yet. It's funny watching it now because I know who Pee Wee Herman is.
Yeah.
I don't know if people had any idea what this character was when the film first came out.
Right.
Unless you had HBO and you had seen the special, and the special, which was like the stage show, was apparently a bit more adult. There was more innuendo, which is interesting, and so I kind of want to go back and watch that. There's like very slight innuendo in this. It's not really. It's nothing you wouldn't let a kid watch.
Right.
You know, there's nothing in this movie that you couldn't let a kid watch.
But you could feel it almost there.
Well,
like,
that's
you
the
can
thing.
almost feel, you'd feel like, you know, like you could feel like there was scenes where they thought about it and they're like, well, we'll just cut it.
and for this, it works. It works
Yeah.
great. I'd be really curious to see what the character was originally like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wonder what people watching this in 1985 thought. And I mean, obviously it was a big hit, and they got a TV show from this. But I have no idea what people thought of when it started, and like what people how people responded to like just like the first like 10, 15 minutes of him in his house just being very weird, and this weird man child, like, you know, playing with his dog. Do you remember
What
people thought of it?
I think it was no.
Okay.
So I came out 85. I was
Yeah.
14,
Yeah.
so I was not aware of the general zeitgeist. I mean,
Yeah.
we made fun of Reagan. You know, that was all I remember.
That's all you remember of 1985.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, there were space shuttles, and we could get nuked at any point. So,
Wow.
it's the 80s.
Do you think this movie had to be made in the 80s? That's something I was watching this. There are certain movies that I think we're going to watch that you're like, yep, this had to have been made in the 80s. Like Predator is very much an 80s movie. 9 to 5 was not a very 80s movie. That definitely feels more like the late 70s.
And it was. I mean,
And it
it
was
made then.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Moonstruck does not feel like it had a time period at all. There's something about the movie they could have made it in the 90s. They could have made it last year.
The later it gets, the more likely it would have been made, because it's so rooted in like nostalgia.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so like maybe 70s is pushing it, but
Yeah. I think that's actually a good point. I think it had to have been made in the 80s or later.
yeah.
But it couldn't necessarily have been made before.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Like
Yeah.
there's such a weird 50s nostalgia in the 80s, and
Yes.
this movie's sort of like that, but in a different way.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I think Back to the Future came out the same year. There's just something of the love of that look of things.
But
And the kitschiness and the, like, this is set in some weird little small town. And I don't you think you would have cared about that in the 70s.
you know, I was just thinking, you know, like Back to the Future, that's still thinking of like, you know, Father Knows Best 50s.
Yeah.
Whereas this is definitely more of a John Waters rebel 50s.
John Waters, yes. Ernie Kovacs on TV 50s.
Right. And I can't believe I didn't think of John Waters before. But,
Oh, I
yeah.
was thinking about it the whole time I was watching this, because as a kid I saw Hairspray.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I you know, I still think it's a great movie. But again, when I think, you know, I brought up The Simpsons earlier, and I always think of one of the best Simpsons episodes is the one that he is on, and you know, his whole thing about collecting like, you know, just weird kitschy stuff from like the 50s, and him responding to, like, you know, Marge, and in fact like the whole Simpsons family as being, you know, like a manifestation of that entire aesthetic. Yeah, it's easy to see Pee-wee's Big Adventure as the kid-friendly version of the same sort of thing that John Waters is playing with at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So John Waters, another thing, and I just thought of this, is B-52s.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like there's a lot of Fred Schneider going on here.
Right. Yes.
There's a wig store.
There's a wig store. We don't get to go into it, but you see it, and like it's right next to like the magic store and the bike shop and everything.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, there is like this entire sort of kitschy thing going on, and they're all coming from the same sort of well.
So, this is our fourth film. I think it's like 2 thumbs up on all of them for both of us.
Yeah.
We gotta get to some turkeys. At this rate, we'll have seen like all the good movies, and then like the rest of the podcast will be like 100 bad movies.
You're right.
It'll be terrible.
We really gotta start working in some terrible films.
We gotta start avoiding the good stuff.
Yeah. And this is our way of saying our next film.
2 films.
Do you have a coin?
I have a penny.
You have a penny.
I don't have a zombie.
You don't have zombie Thomas Jefferson?
Zombie's
Okay.
good.
So, our choices for the next film: Heads, Roadhouse; Tails, Maximum Overdrive.
See, this is 50% that we might still like it. So.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, I have a feeling Roadhouse is actually going to be a good movie.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean.
That's
50%.
the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas everything I've heard about Maximum Overdrive is that it is not a good movie,
Yeah,
but it is a movie I can't wait to see.
I saw part of it, and I was like, oh.
All right, so Heads, Roadhouse; Tails, Maximum Overdrive.
Oh. I don't know if I want to tell you.
What is it?
It's Heads.
Do you want to do Maximum Overdrive instead?
No. We gotta follow the law.
The law that we made up like 2 episodes ago?
Exactly.
All right.
Sorry.
So then the next episode is going to be Roadhouse,
Man, 5 good movies in a row.
followed by Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah. Ugh.
Until next time, tell them Large Marge sent you.